Don't have much time to read books? Want to make the most of your commute? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the What's It About channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Let's get started.
It is genuinely really good to be back. And today, well, we are tackling a heavyweight.
Oh, we really are. A tree titan.
Yeah, titan of literature.
We're doing a deep dive into a book that isn't just a novel. It's practically a national institution.
Absolutely.
We're looking at a work that the sources widely consider the definitive classic of Turkish literature. It's, the kind of book that practically every student in Turkey has had to read, analyze, sweat over.
Write countless essays about, yeah.
Exactly. We are talking about Sinekli Bakal, or as it was originally known in English, The Clown and His Daughter.
And right off the bat, you've hit on the central mystery.
The paradox, right?
Yeah, the central irony that makes this book so fascinating to me. Because you have this novel that is supposed to be the quintessential representation of Turkish identity.
The ultimate Ottoman neighborhood story.
It's exactly the transition from empire to republic, all of that. And yet,
the sources are just screaming this one huge paradox at us. It was written in English first.
it's wild.
That is the part that completely blows my mind. We are looking at a novel written by a Turkish woman, Halide Edip Adıvar, while she was living in self-imposed exile.
In London and Paris.
Right, in 1935. So the question we need to unpack for you today in this deep dive is, well, how does a novel written in English for a Western audience by an exile become the ultimate bridge between the Ottoman Empire and the modern republic?
That is the million-dollar question, because when you look at the research, this isn't just a nostalgia trip.
It's not just a quaint little story.
No, not at all. It's not just about a grocery store and a dusty Istanbul street. As we go through the sources, the literary critiques, historical analyses, her own notes, it becomes clear that this book is a sophisticated philosophical inquiry.
Right.
It is, it's essentially a laboratory.
A laboratory. That's a pretty intense word for a novel about a neighborhood grocery store.
It fits, though. Adıvar is testing a hypothesis here. She is asking a very specific, very difficult question. She wants to know if Eastern spirituality and Western rationalism can actually get married.
Like literally and metaphorically?
Literally and metaphorically, yes.
Yeah.
Can they coexist? Or does one have to destroy the other? And she tests this not with chemicals, obviously, but with characters.
Characters living in a neighborhood called Sinekli Bakal,
Which translates to...
the fly-infested grocery.
Right. Not exactly the most romantic name for a neighborhood, is it?
No, it doesn't really scream utopia to me.
No, it doesn't. It's earthy. It's real. And that is exactly the point. It's not a fairy tale. It's a slice of life. But before we walk down that street and, swat away the flies, we have to deal with that weird origin story you mentioned.
Because understanding how this book was written tells us everything about what it actually means.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's unpack the linguistic paradox here. The year is 1935. Halide Edip Adıvar is in London.
And for context, for you listening, she is a major figure.
Right, she's an intellectual, a writer, a political activist. But she is in self-imposed exile. So why is she writing this specific story in English at this specific time?
To understand that, you really have to understand her position. She is physically in London, sure, but her heart is entirely in Istanbul.
She writes this manuscript, The Clown and His Daughter.
And it gets published by George Allen and Unwin Ltd.
Which is a British publisher.
Exactly. Now, think about her motivation. The sources are very clear on this. She isn't writing for her neighbors back in Istanbul. She is writing for a British audience.
She is trying to explain the Ottoman social fabric to Westerners.
Which is a tall order in 1935.
I mean, the perception of Turkey in Europe wasn't exactly nuanced back then, was it?
Extremely tall order. The perception was frankly terrible. She is trying to present a view of Turkish life that transcends those lazy Orientalist tropes that were so popular in Europe at the time.
The exotic harems, the barbarism.
The fatalism, the mysticism, without any real substance. She wanted to show the human depth of her culture. The sources call this an act of foreign language creation.
Foreign language creation, that's a great term.
It is. She was interpreting her own culture for the other with a capital O. She was essentially saying to the West, look, we are complex, thinking, feeling human beings with a deep philosophy. We are not just caricatures.
So she writes it in English to explain her people to the West, but then obviously it becomes a Turkish classic later.
Yes, it does.
The sources mention something called Tesla's back translation. Can we break that down? Because, I mean, did she just hire a translator to put it into Turkish?
No, and this is where it gets really interesting technically. It was not a direct translation. Textless back translation is a fancy academic way of saying she reimagined the book for her own people.
So she didn't just translate the English sentences she wrote in London word for word.
Not at all.
Eh.
She recontextualized the entire narrative.
Recontextualized how? Does the story actually change?
The core story stays the same, but the delivery shifts significantly. The sources point out some fascinating differences between the English and Turkish texts.
For example?
Well, in the English version, she has to include a lot of philosophical dialogue explaining Islam.
Explaining Sufism, explaining why characters act the way they do.
Right, because the Western reader is clueless about these things. She has to be the tour guide and the professor all at once.
She has to bridge the knowledge gap. Like, she has to explain what a dervish is before she can explain what the dervish means to the plot.
Exactly. But when she serialized it in the Turkish newspaper Haber in late 1935 and then published it as a book in 1936, she streamlined those dialogues.
Because she knew the local audience already understood the cultural undercurrents.
Right. They didn't need a lecture on what a mosque is or the basics of Islamic theology. So the Turkish version is actually tighter in some ways.
But deeper in others.
Yes, because she can use cultural shorthands that a British reader would never get.
And she changed the title, too, which is a huge detail. The clown and his daughter focuses on two specific people, Tevfik and Rabia.
But Cynically Bakal focuses on the place.
Precisely, and that shift is significant. It's not just a marketing decision.
No. By changing the title to Cynically Bakal, she signals to the Turkish reader that the main character of this story isn't actually a person.
It's the mahalle, the neighborhood itself.
The community is the protagonist. The fly-infested grocery is the anchor for the whole world she's building.
So let's talk about this neighborhood. Let's conceptually walk down Sinekli Bakal Street. The sources describe it very vividly. We are in the Aksaray district of Istanbul.
It's the late 19th century, maybe early 20th.
What are we seeing if we look around?
You are seeing narrow lanes, you're seeing wooden two-story houses. But there's this specific architectural detail the sources highlight repeatedly.
The eaves of the roofs.
Yes, the eaves overhanging the street so far that they nearly touch the eaves of the house across the way.
So the street almost feels like a tunnel or a room.
It feels like an enclosure, a shared ceiling. And the sources point out this isn't just about urban design or a lack of city planning. Adıvar uses this as a metaphor for architectural synthesis.
Architectural synthesis.
This physical closeness forces social intimacy. You literally cannot ignore your neighbor when your roofs are touching. It creates an intercommunicative space.
Where private leaves become public property.
Exactly.
Which sounds like a nightmare for an introvert, by the way, or anyone who values their privacy. Everyone knows what you're cooking for dinner.
It might be a nightmare for a modern individualist, for sure. But in the context of the novel, this represents the traditional Turkish social ideal. Solidarity, rhythm.
Everyone moves together.
It's a collective organism. If one house burns, they all burn. If one person feasts, they all share.
And Adıvar contrasts this sharply with the konaks, the elite mansions, and the palace.
Right, the rich people houses.
How are they different, socially speaking, according to the text?
The konaks are described as sterile. They are luxurious, yes, and they are spacious, but they are completely isolated.
They are cut off from that communal rhythm you just mentioned.
So you have this binary established early on in the story. The warm, messy, gossipy solidarity of the street versus the cold, lonely luxury of the mansion.
The street is where the soul lives. The mansion is where power lives.
Beautifully put. And hanging over all of this, the street and the mansion, is the political atmosphere. We really can't ignore the timeline here.
No, this is set during the Istibdat era of Sultan Abdülhamid II.
The era of oppression.
Shadows. Spies. The sources mention heshis, secret police, just everywhere.
It is a time of absolute fear. That is the backdrop to this entire novel. People are terrified of being sent into exile.
Sürgün.
Because if you think the wrong thing or write the wrong thing,
or even joke about the wrong thing, you disappear. You could be reported by your neighbor, your brother, the shopkeeper.
Adıvar chooses this specific era to explore the roots of Turkish modernization.
She's showing us the pressure cooker that eventually birthed the Republic. It is not a coincidence she picked this time. She wants to show what happens to a society when it cannot breathe.
Precisely.
So we have the setting. A claustrophobic but warm neighborhood under the shadow of a police state. Now let's meet the people who actually live there. because the sources emphasize these aren't just characters, they are symbols of a nation in flux.
They are archetypes, certainly, but Adıvar is skilled enough to make them feel human. They struggle, they laugh, they cry. Let's start with the synthesis herself. The protagonist, Rabia.
Rabia. She is the daughter in the English title, The Clown and His Daughter. Her lineage is, well, complicated.
To say the least, she is the product of a very strange marriage. Her mother is Emine, the daughter of the neighborhood imam.
And Emin is conservative, stubborn, serious.
She represents the rigid, dogmatic side of tradition. She is the rules.
And her father is Tevfik, known as Kustafik or Tevfik the girl.
Let's unpack him for a second because he is such a colorful character and frankly surprising one for a 1930s novel. He is a folk artist.
He is the quintessential representative of Turkish folk culture. He's a mimic.
He's a Karagöz puppeteer. That's the traditional shadow theater where puppets perform satire behind a lit screen.
And he's a Zen, a male performer who dresses in drag to play female roles in theater.
You can see why the conservative imam, father-in-law, might have an issue with him.
Oh, the imam hates him. The sources say he views Tevfik as loose, lacking seriousness, morally ambiguous. He thinks he's a complete disgrace.
And eventually this tears the marriage apart.
Yeah.
Emin leaves Tevfik because he's just too, well, fun. Too unserious.
She chooses the dogma of her father over the joy of her husband.
She wants a serious man, and she got a clown.
Exactly. But Rabia is born from this union. She has her mother's stubbornness and religious grounding, but she has her father's artistic soul.
She is the bridge between the rigid rule and the free spirit.
And her superpower is her voice.
Yes, she is a hafiz. She has memorized the entire Quran. When she recites, it's not just a religious duty, it's high art.
She sings Eastern music, and this voice allows her to be a traveler within the society.
Because she has this incredible talent, she is invited out of the dirty streets of Sinekli Bakkal and into the wealthy Konaks to perform.
So she is the elevator. She connects the mosque, which is sacred, to the mansion, which is secular.
And that makes her the national ideal for Adıvar. Rabia is rooted in tradition. She isn't rejecting her culture like some of the modernized elites we see later, but she possesses the intellectual independence to navigate the wider world.
She is the heart of the East.
She is capable of absorbing the West without losing herself. She represents a confident identity that doesn't need to destroy the past to build a future.
But for Rabia to reach her full potential, she has to navigate a theological minefield. The sources highlight a stark contrast between two religious figures she grows up around.
Her grandfather, Imam al-Hami, and this other figure, Vebi Dede.
This is one of the most important philosophical arguments in the book. If you miss this, you really miss the point of the novel.
You do. Imam al-Hami represents the religion of fear.
Fire and brimstone.
Hellfire, punishment, strict rules, dry dogma. Do this or God will burn you. Don't listen to music. Don't laugh too loud.
It's a religion of control. It's the religion that banished her father, Tevfik.
It separates people into sinners and saints.
Which is a very stressful way to grow up for a child.
Incredibly stressful. On the other side, you have Vebi Dede. He's a Mevlevi dervish. He represents the religion of love.
The mystic.
The mystic. For Vebi Dede, music, beauty, and tolerance are the actual ways to reach God. He teaches Rabia that God isn't a punisher waiting in the dark with a stick.
He teaches that God constitutes the entirety of reality.
Meaning God and Satan are just aspects of a singular truth. It's the concept of unity of being, or wadat al-wujud.
That is a very heavy concept for a kid in a grocery store neighborhood.
It is a heavy concept.
Yeah.
But it is the key that unlocks Rabia's mind. Because she embraces Vebi Dede's religion of love, she becomes capable of connecting with the West.
If she had stayed stuck in her grandfather's religion of fear, the rest of the story just couldn't happen.
She would have been too closed off, too afraid of contamination. The religion of love allows her to see the divine in everything, including the infidel.
Which brings us to the West. Enter the love interest.
Peregrini.
Peregrini, an Italian pianist, a former Catholic priest.
A former priest. Talk about baggage.
He has a lot of spiritual baggage. The sources describe him as spiritually homeless. He is disillusioned with Western materialism.
The idea that science and money are the only things that matter.
But he is also disillusioned with the dogmatic Christianity he left behind. He is looking for something real. He's looking for soul. He feels the West has become a machine.
And he finds it in Sinekli Bakkal, of all places.
He finds it in the sounds of Sinekli Bakkal, specifically Rabia's voice.
This is the courtship of East and West. It's not just a casual romance, it's a musical collaboration.
It really is. They meet at the Selim Pasha mansion, that elite space we mentioned earlier. Peregrini hears Rabia reciting the Quran and chanting the Mevlit.
And he is captivated, not just by the girl, but by the authenticity of the sound. He realizes that this Eastern culture possesses the spiritual depth that he felt the West had lost to machines and money. He hears the connection to the divine that he's been missing.
But there is a conflict, a big one. Rabia is a devout Muslim girl in the late Ottoman era. He is an Italian ex-priest. This isn't exactly a match made in heaven for the neighbors.
No, not at all. And Rabia struggles with this deeply.
Yeah.
The sources mention she performs a deep internal audit.
She asks herself, is music a sin? Can I love a non-Muslim? Is this betrayal?
This is where the training from Vedete, the religion of love, really comes into play. She has to find a way to reconcile her faith with her feelings.
So how do they resolve it? Peregrini takes a drastic step.
He converts, he becomes a Muslim, and takes the name Osman.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Is this just a convenience conversion? Like, I want to marry the girl, the laws say I have to be Muslim, so I'll just sign the papers. Because that happens all the time in stories.
It is easy to read it that way, but the expert view, and Adıvar's intended view based on the sources, is that it's much deeper than that.
It isn't just about getting the girl.
It represents the West, recognizing the validity, even the superiority in Adıvar's eyes, of the Eastern community life and spiritual connection.
Peregrini isn't just becoming Turkish to get a pass.
He is finding a home that the West couldn't provide. He is the seeking West, finally finding an anchor. He converts because he actually believes this community has something his own culture lost.
So the marriage happens, Rabia and Osman.
And this marriage is the ultimate thesis of the book. It symbolizes the synthesis. You have Peregrini's piano representing Western intellect, technique, science, structure, harmony.
And you have Rabia's voice, Eastern heart, spirit, emotion, tradition, melody.
Adıvar is saying to the reader, we don't have to choose. We could be both. We can have the technique of the West and the soul of the East.
And they have a kid, right?
They do, a son named Recep. And he represents the future generation born of this synthesis.
The Republic, essentially.
He is the proof that the marriage can bear fruit.
It sounds lovely, romantic even. But we know real life isn't just a romance novel, and neither is this book.
There is a dark political shadow hanging over everything.
We touched on the spies earlier, but let's look at the actual political conflict, because the book isn't just about love, it's about power.
Right. While the romance is happening, the Ottoman Empire is collapsing. Adıvar dramatizes this through a father-son conflict in the elite class.
You have Selim Pasha, the head of the Zaptai, the police.
The bad guy.
Well, the sources say he represents the state. He is loyal to the Sultan. He defends the system even though it's decaying.
He believes that without this iron grip, the empire will fall apart. He thinks he is a patriot holding back chaos.
Then you have his son, Hilmi. Hilmi is a young Turk, a revolutionary. He wants to overthrow the Sultan and bring in Western democracy.
So you would assume Adıvar is on Hilmi's side, right? Since she was a modernizer and a supporter of the Republic later on in her own life.
You would think so. But this is where it gets really interesting and where the sources show Adıvar's intellectual honesty. She critiques both of them.
Really? She critiques the revolutionaries, too.
Yes, she obviously sees Selim Pasha's system as oppressive. But she portrays Hilmi and his revolutionary friends as simple copies of Western radicals.
They are disconnected from the people.
They are elitist in their own way. They don't understand the Senekli Bakal reality any more than the Sultan does.
They want to impose a system from the top down, just like the Sultan. They probably speak French better than they speak the language of the street.
That is a fascinating nuance. She's basically saying, don't just copy the West blindly.
Exactly. Revolutions that don't understand the local culture are doomed to fail, or just become new tyrannies.
And the person who suffers the most from this political clash is actually our clown, Tevfik.
Poor Tevfik, he gets exiled, right?
Twice. First, he gets exiled for his art. He does a mimicry act that offends someone in power.
Which just shows the regime's fragility. They can't even tolerate a joke.
Then later, he gets exiled again for helping the Young Turks, Hilmi's group.
He just can't win. He is squeezed between the old guard and the revolutionaries.
But he is the spirit of the people. He represents resilience. Governments come and go, ideologies change, but the folk spirit, the humor, the ability to laugh and survive, that endures.
And that leads us to the climax of the book's timeline, the 1908 revolution.
The Young Turk Revolution. Freedom is declared. The Constitution is back.
And the exiles return. Tevfik comes back to the neighborhood.
And the crowd, the same neighbors who called him a loose clown and shunned him, now greet him as a Hurriyet Kahramanı, a hero of liberty.
That is deeply ironic.
It's historically ironic. The sources highlight how Adıvar is showing us how fickle public opinion and official history can be.
The man labeled a criminal is now a hero just because the regime changed. But Tevfik hasn't changed.
He's still just the clown. He didn't become a political theorist while he was away. He just survived.
I love that. It grounds the big political events in human absurdity.
Now, speaking of grounding things, there is a medical detail in the book that the sources flagged as really significant. It seems small, but apparently it carries a huge symbolic weight.
It involves Rabia's pregnancy?
Yes, the C-section.
Rabia has a difficult birth with her son Recep, and she is saved by a cesarean section.
Why does the author include this specific medical procedure? It feels very technical for a philosophical novel.
It's highly symbolic. Remember, Rabia is the Eastern synthesis. She's the vessel of tradition. But biology, nature, threatens to kill her.
The old ways of birthing aren't working.
Who saves her? Western science. The C-section is a technical Western medical intervention.
Ah, I see. So Adıvar is reinforcing the partnership.
Exactly. She's saying, look, the East has the soul, but we need the West's tools. We need their science, their medicine, their technique to survive and thrive.
It reinforces the idea that the West contributes the intellect to this marriage.
If she had just prayed, she might have died. If she had just used science without the soul, there would be no Rabia. You need both.
It's a pragmatic acceptance of Western superiority in technique, but not in spirit.
This connects perfectly to what the sources call the hidden objection.
Right, the hidden objection. This is a theory by critics like Burna Moran, who is an absolute giant in Turkish literary criticism.
The idea is that the whole novel is a critique of radical Westernization.
Because there was a type of modernization in the early Turkish Republic that wanted to erase the past, erase the Ottoman identity, erase the religion, just become European.
And Adıvar is saying, no, don't do that.
She is saying modernization shouldn't mean becoming Frankish, which is the term for the superficial elites who just wear European clothes and listen to opera but have no soul.
She argues that true modernization is integrating Western tools, like the C-section or the piano, with the Turkish soul, Rabia's voice, the neighborhood solidarity.
It's a message of integration, not replacement.
Integration, not replacement. You don't have to kill your grandfather to build a future.
So the book comes out in 1935 and 36. It's a hit. But its legacy really gets solidified a few years later in 1942. There was a prize involved.
The CHP Prize. The Republican People's Party, Roman Mukafaji. This was a very big deal. The state was looking for the novel that best represented the new nation.
And it was a showdown. Sinekli Bakal versus another famous book, Yaban, by Yakup Kadri Karasmanoğlu.
The Battle of the Books. Yaban is a very different book. It's about an intellectual who goes to a village and absolutely hates it.
He feels completely alienated from the peasants.
It portrays the rural people as backward, hostile, and essentially unredeemable. It is a very pessimistic look at the Anatolian reality.
A very cynical view.
Very cynical. And in the first round of voting, the sources note that Yaban was actually winning. It had 30 points to Sinekli Bakal's 28.
The intellectuals initially leaned toward that cynical view, perhaps because it reflected their own frustration with the modernization process.
But Sinekli Bakal won the final vote.
It did, and that matters because it shows that ultimately the Turkish intellectual elite and the state preferred Adıvar's vision.
They chose the integrated vision of identity over the alienated one.
They wanted to believe that the intellectual and the people could be united, like Rabia and Peregrini, rather than enemies. They voted for hope.
It's a hopeful choice. It's a choice for optimism.
It is a statement that the gap can be bridged.
But the story doesn't end there.
Right.
This book has been adapted into movies, plays, TV shows, and it seems like every generation finds something new or something controversial in it.
The 1967 film is a classic, a Yaşasın melodrama, starring the legendary Türkan Şoray as Rabia and Edison as Peregrini.
It focused heavily on the romance, obviously. Made Peregrini get beaten up to heighten the drama. It was a tearjerker.
It stripped away some of the philosophy but kept the heart. It's beloved.
But the 2007 TV series, that was a different story entirely.
That was a disaster. It was canceled after only 5 episodes.
Why? How do you mess up a classic that badly?
Well, the gossip and the reports and the sources suggest it was too hot to handle politically. There were claims that the channel was uncomfortable with how the reactionary father or the imam were portrayed.
Or perhaps how the religious nuances were handled.
In 2007.
In 2007, the screenwriter, Gökhan Aktumer, famously said, Halide Edip's pen has been broken.
That suggests that even in the 21st century, the delicate balance Adıvar struck between religion and secularism, tradition and modernity, is still a minefield.
It is still highly sensitive. The synthesis she proposed is still being debated
That is wild. A book from the 1930s is still causing trouble in the 2000s.
because the questions haven't been resolved. The synthesis is still a work in progress.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Let's bring it home. We have a book that refuses easy answers.
It refuses to simplify. It humanizes the grand political debates. It tells us that we don't have to choose between the religion of fear and the religion of love. We can choose love.
It tells us we don't have to choose between being Turkish and being modern. We can synthesize them.
It's about creating a shared enchanted future. The sources mentioned a musical composition in the book called The Enchanted Well.
Yes, that composition is the art that comes from the synthesis. It's the proof that it works. It's the harmony of the piano and the chant.
It is beauty born from difference.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over. In a world that feels incredibly polarized right now, East versus West, secular versus religious, tradition versus progress, Halide Edip Adıvar offered a third way almost 100 years ago. She offered synthesis.
And the question remains, if Adıvar were writing today, would she still believe that synthesis is possible?
Or have the Mahalle, the neighborhood, and the Konak, the elite mansion, become so separated, so walled off from each other that they can never touch eaves again?
Have the eaves stopped touching? That is a haunting question.
It is. But as long as we read cynically about Hall, the possibility remains.
I agree completely.
That's all from us for now. If there are books you wish you could listen to a summary of, don't forget to write them in the comments. Maybe our next content will be the book you suggested. Stay healthy and happy.